So welcome to It's Not All About the Numbers podcast, the leadership podcast that doesn't just focus on the bottom line. Hi, my name is Chris, and that is Mike.
Hi, everyone.
And our co-host this week is Kathryn Jackson, founder of the Great Recharge. I'll do that again. Founder of the Great Recharge, leadership coach and author. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you very much indeed. It's great to be here. I've been a big fan for a while, and I feel like I should be doing a workout right now because that's typically what I do when I listen to you guys.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad it's fitting in somewhere because we always have that debate where when you listen to your podcast, is it on a dog walk or wherever it is? But if you like what we're doing, then please subscribe. Then it will pop up and then you can listen on your podcast providers. And if you really want to help, then click those 5 stars because as we worked out over the last couple of weeks, Mike really needs his confidence boosted. So their 5 stars will help quite a lot. Anyway, Mike, speaking of you, how's your week been?
Big me up, right? Great. It's been a great week actually. I am just literally back from Cologne in Germany, where I saw my final Depeche Mode concert of the tour. Which was great because it was in the standing bit, which I don't normally do. So that was quite cool, actually. Lots of cool videos. But I think the best bit was not necessarily the concert. It was the fact I got to hang around with a bunch of schoolmates that I've been friends with since I was like 11 years old, that nowadays only ever see at funerals and weddings. So it was great to just kind of hang out and just chat. You might hear me being a little bit more brummy than normal as well after a weekend with brummies.
I can definitely hear a slight twang there, which is great to hear. You have to fill us in on the lingo as well as we go.
It's just more swear words.
Is it? Brilliant. How about yourself, Kathryn?
Yeah. Been a really mixed one actually, to be perfectly frank. I've just had a wonderful Cornish coastal walk. I'm currently down in Cornwall on holiday with my mum and dad, and I have my 12-year-old boy here. My goodness, the weather has been absolutely unbelievably spectacularly bad since we came. I think I jinxed it on the first day by saying it can't possibly rain for 3 weeks, and it turns out so far it has. But I needed that walk because we had the pleasure of spending most of the weekend in the paediatric emergency department down here in Cornwall. Because Mr. 12 managed to somehow eat peanuts, which we're not sure how because it wasn't in the dish that he ordered. But yeah, we had a spectacularly interesting weekend. So I think, big shout out to all the staff in the Cornish ED down here because they were bloody amazing. So please don't don't believe everything you hear on the news. They were fab.
Exactly. Good old NHS.
Oh, absolutely.
A&E teams. That's great to hear.
Yeah, awesome.
You said you were visiting. Where are you based normally?
Yeah, so normally I live over in New Zealand, so Mike and I have been chatting about the potential to come and talk here, but I didn't really fancy, a 1-2 a.m. podcast appearance, and so just timing was beautiful. I happened to be coming over here for my dad's 80th, so it's been really great.
Excellent. And you are originally English, are you? Because I can definitely hear the Kiwi accent.
It's so funny. Talk about Mike and his accent. So all my English friends think I sound Kiwi, and all my New Zealand friends think I sound incredibly posh like the Queen. So it's kind of like this really mixed hybrid.
I don't think Mike's ever been accused of that.
Queen. I don't know.
Sorry, Mike.
After the weekend I've just had, the sarcasm and banter, I can take it.
Yeah, you bring it on yourself. But I do like regional accents. I think, it's great. Anyway, so moving on. So yeah, my week, I had a week off. So probably similar to yourself, without the A&E, lots of walking. I did the Tour d'Angleterre Nord, which is me basically reminding myself where all of the UK cities were after not knowing and embarrassing myself. So I went through Nottingham, through to Harrogate, through Birmingham, actually, Mike.
Yeah.
Not in that order, otherwise I'd be very lost. It was a great trip, and we ended up in York. And
Oh my
I've never been to
goodness.
York, which was
Oh,
amazing.
do you know you're I'm visualizing, even as you're using those words to share what you're doing, I'm almost visualizing that. And one thing I adore about that part of the world is the ancient buildings. So what did you think of York?
It was amazing. I did not realize how obviously it's got very, very deep history, but I didn't realize how much it had been used in film. And there's the little street called the Shambles, which is part of the Harry Potter, the sort of shopping where the books are and you buy your cauldrons or whatever. But that was amazing. I enjoyed it. And obviously you got the Roman wall, and
That's awesome. Thank you.
but maybe not an 8-hour drive on a bank holiday, which is how it was with the kids. But thank God for tablets and personal computer tablets.
Tablets,
that is
like not tablets.
not sedatives for the kids. God, this is taking a turn. Anyway, so moving on.
It's almost like a confessional. It's interesting.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah. How did you get through the journey? So this week we found some interesting research collectively, and Kathryn, I saw you comment on this, so it'd be great to sort of touch on this. And I know that you've been on holiday and you've been almost doing a little test, but there was this great article, new study highlighting the minimal social interactions that we have that are so important. And the reason why this is important, because a lot of discussion that we have around transformation is a sort of people first approach, and the relationship side and the culture side is so important. And also there's so many people having conversations about getting back to the office or being part of community now that we're working remotely. And I thought this was a super interesting place to start.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm accidentally a wellbeing professional, largely as a result of the experience that we had in New Zealand, rebuilding a region after a whole series of earthquakes. So, my thoughts are very much with Taiwan right now, because we kind of know an awful lot about what they're likely to be going through. And I think one of the really big standout pieces of research that was done was looking at the difference between humans that live in stressful worlds and just kind of survive each day versus humans that live in the same stressful worlds and actually continue to thrive. So to continue to enjoy most of the time the world that they live in and the life that they live. And, one of the really important things that thrivers do is they choose to recharge regularly. What do I mean by that? Well, they notice how they're feeling. They notice how full their battery seems to feel generally. And as a result of what they notice, they make different choices. So somebody whose battery perhaps is fading and who doesn't understand the consequence of the connection factor might actually start to retreat further and further and further from the world. We all know that feeling where you're invited into a meeting back in the office and you've been working from home for like 6 months to 2 years or whatever. It almost feels like that first day at school when you kind of get those jitters in your tummy and you're like feeling a bit sick and am I going to know anyone and that kind of thing. And I think the reality is that with the ease of online connection, on the one hand amazing, on the other hand I think we're accidentally forgetting how to connect for real and how to make friends with people, and so that is a huge part of recharging our own batteries, and so we can feel better.
There's a really interesting thing. So I'm going to link this back to me again, of course. So the trip I've just done to Germany with school friends, it's related to what you just said there. So there's a bunch of us, haven't seen each other for years. We're all hanging out together, and gone to a bar in an evening. The following day we go to another bar, and I'm just there thinking, I just had enough. I've had enough of this, just for a bit. And I literally just took but this is a learnt experience, right? It's a learnt thing now. It's like, actually it's okay for me to say, see you later guys, I'm just going off for a walk, and taking myself out of that environment. And I think it's that point that you made there, that noticing point is the trick. It might not be the same thing for everybody that you need to do, but it's noticing you need to do something.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, Mike. So what did you do?
I just put my headphones on, listened to some music, went for a walk just on my own.
Is that something, you've mentioned, coming to events and conferences and stuff like that? Is that something, not that I want to go into Mike too much, but is that something that is very much part of your personality, or is it a part of environment? Because this research seems to suggest that it's environmental rather than personality based. Like, people are kind of almost like opting out because they don't realize how important some of these smaller interactions are.
I think it's both. I think I don't think you can really separate out the two. I am in my environment, so
yeah,
it's how I experience it, right? It's like, it's the same as the question, do you and I see red as the same color? I mean, it just happens to be, that's what we point at. So,
but I suppose if I put myself in your shoes, I don't think, I'm more of an extrovert and, happy to sort of sit there and just wait. And
keep on drinking.
But I suppose I could forget how important some of those social interactions are. And we experienced it during the pandemic, right? Which was like, I'm going to work at home, and do I have to go back to the office because it's a pain in the arse? Now we're trying to get that back in, mindset, and people are struggling with it. But maybe it's because we've forgotten how important those interactions are.
Oh, totally. Yeah. So I think, what you're describing there, Chris, I guess, is a combination of nature and nurture. Some of us find it more energizing to spend long periods of time with large groups of people, but some of us find it more energizing to spend group time with smaller groups. But regardless of who you are, there will always be a tipping point where for everybody, even the sort of most gregarious and extrovert in the world, will at some point want to go and recharge their batteries by spending a bit of alone time. So I guess, looping this back to Mike, from a coaching perspective, we call this awareness and then accountability. So the more leaders can help teams to become aware of how their interactions are impacting the way that they feel, the way that they function, how connected they feel, and then sort of act accordingly. So if I'm feeling absolutely exhausted, and I know that I'm about to go and spend time with people who I really get on well with and who typically energize me, perhaps leaning into that with a bit more confidence might be quite helpful. But if I'm exhausted and I'm about to go into a meeting where I know I hate everyone and I feel, picked on and I don't feel heard, then chances are that's going to be a harder meeting for me to get through. I guess one of the things for me is that I'm on holiday, so my usual recharges are back in New Zealand. And so what I decided to do was kind of play with this concept of micro connections, and by consciously making eye contact without it being weird as people come towards you, maybe engaging with their dog first, because my goodness, everyone in this bloody country seems to have a dog these days.
Guilty.
Yeah. And then, smiling and saying hello as people go past can be really, really interesting. Getting to know people. I even had a chat with an incredible guy down in the village, who's like in his late 80s, because of the fact that, I was asking him directions instead of using Google Maps. Just little things like that can help us to reconnect with fellow humans.
And this isn't, just to be clear, this isn't a generational thing, right? This is just people in general not wanting to engage, or maybe relying on their phones a bit too much, right?
Oh God, yeah, no, that's a whole podcast in itself, isn't it? Yeah, certainly. I get a lot of clients who are sent to me in terms of, please, can you coach this person so that they, want to come back to work as opposed to staying at home. And humans are complicated, and there's so much going on for people at home and in their kind of home lives as well as at work, that it's not as simple as just telling people, right, we're all going to come back to the office now, or we're going to be half back to the office. Offices are recharging for some and not for others. I think this is highlighting the huge correlation between workplace design and well-being cultures, and leadership skills. Are you the kind of leader who just expects everyone to come back and then sort themselves out? Or are you actually noticing that there are some people in your team finding it harder than others to come back, who you may need to actually have a different conversation with in order to support them back? And maybe these micro connections could be a place to start, so that we become a bit more familiar with that kind of meeting someone new again.
It's the water cooler, right? I think it's the summary. I think a lot of people said that they were missing that, the serendipity of, hi, how's it going? And to some people, it's the classic, I'm walking down the corridor and someone's walking towards me. Like, how do you feel about that interaction? Some people are like, oh my God, don't say hello, don't make eye contact, whatever. Other people are like, oh, it's Dave from, marketing or whatever. And just, trying to link this to you a little bit on the great recharge, right? So conversations we've had in the past, Mike and I've had in the past, have been around, the great resignation, when people were being told to get back into the office. And now we've got the great return to work, which, is like, you've got to be in 3 days a week or whatever. Otherwise, you might as well think of getting another job. Where does the great recharge fit into all this? I feel like it does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, this, as humans, we want things to be generalized, don't we? We want one size fits all for everything. So I think that's where the great comes from. But to be honest, in New Zealand, when we were, I was part of the rebuild following the Christchurch earthquakes and also the Kaikoura earthquakes. And we were lucky enough to be almost part of a live study, to be perfectly frank, of psychosocial teams and academic researchers who came into the regions to understand, as I said, the psychology of living in extreme stress. And they were unpacking what is it about being human in this really extra stressful environment? What can we expect? What can we learn? And then how do we mitigate for this, so that we see this as an opportunity to potentially grow stronger? And one of the core messages that really stuck with me was that, after a significant traumatic event, so define that as you will, whether you were just part of whether you were part of this global experience in terms of shared anxiety, shared fear, shared uncertainty, or whether you were personally affected through the COVID years. Whatever that was for you, the science suggests that it can take up to 10 years for the additional cortisol and sense of tiredness and I'm totally over this to actually leave. And so what I wanted to do was take all these fairly disempowering concepts like the great exhaustion, the great resignation, and actually try to create something a little bit more empowering. And one of the really critical things that we learned in Christchurch was noticing your battery and then choosing to do something to recharge it rather than hope it magically recharges itself, is a really critical differentiator between people who will simply get through life from this point on almost, versus people who will actually come back into their sense of living again, which sounds quite grand, doesn't it? But actually, that's what we noticed.
How the hell did you end up doing that? So you kind of implied that you were lucky, or that the circumstance of the earthquake meant that you got involved in it. But what were you doing before that meant that you ended up doing that?
So, I mean, God, my background is within people and culture. So I spent the first sort of 10, 12 years of my career over in the UK working in the corporate finance space, working within banks, where I specialised in engagement and understanding how do we hook into what drives, motivates and engages employees in terms of performance outcomes, productivity, etc. I became a coach, a leadership coach, and And that was effectively what I was doing in 2010. I was actually working in New Zealand for my own organisation. I set up Career Balance when I was over there, and I was working within the construction industry at the time, coaching leaders in terms of motivating and engaging their teams. And then, one of the biggest earthquakes recorded in history for New Zealand occurred, which was followed by about 5 to 6 years of both aftershocks and rebuild of the city, which is actually still going on. So pretty bloody relentless. And as a result, the construction industry did what any good organization does when it comes to keeping employees safe. They crunched the numbers, and their health and safety teams calculated that at least 1, possibly 2 people would die during the rebuild, not as a result of earthquakes, but as a result of the change that happens to us when we're stressed. We start making poor choices. Those choices potentially put us or our team at risk. And the health and safety data, when we're looking at numbers, informed the leadership. And the leadership said, look, not on our watch. We are going to do everything we can to understand how to prevent this from happening. We're not putting fruit bowls on reception. We're not offering free gym membership. We're going to save lives. We're going to keep our people alive. And so I was one of 5 peak performance coaches from around Australasia who was selected to go and work directly with places like New Zealand Red Cross, New Zealand Institute for Wellbeing and Resilience, the University of Canterbury. And what we were doing was we were learning from academic research and then creating resources and contributing to policies and conversations in the workplace that drove well-being outcomes, rather than just leaving it to chance and hoping that people would get through the rebuild.
When you were explaining the Great Recharge a moment ago and the noticing and taking action, so almost like that positive step, and you've just said about crunching the numbers, using the research, and then getting people to apply that. How did it land? Was it adopted? Were people ready for it, or was the resistance? How did that work?
Yeah, so I think when you say it's really difficult to define what it was, because it turned out to be a whole program of engagement at a well-being level. So if you imagine that you've got an organization which drives engagement as a result of doing stuff, and that's great, because it means we've got people within the organisation who really want to work hard, and they're loyal and they love what they do, and they do a great job all the time. And what we recognised was that people who do that but without that well-being factor run the greatest risk of burning out. Often it's our really, really engaged, loyal, amazing, productive people that we just land more and more work onto. And so the well-being related initiatives were really broad, Mike. So they went from emotional workshops, so learning to tune into what your inner voice is saying to you, whether it's helping you or harming you, whether there are specific hacks that you can use to turn around that FFS voice, the one that says, for goodness sake. We ran workshops like that. And I have to say that there were plenty of, engineers and project managers who were like, dude, I'm an engineer. I'm happy or sad, occasionally angry. This is bullshit. I can't really work out what this has got to do with me. But we were able to then really turn that around in terms of taking time with them to understand like the huge part that emotion and mental health plays in navigating stressful environments. Some of the really, really well-received stuff were things like lunch and learn. So the lunch and learn was every Friday, and it was all about empowering the team to think about something that was really important to them that they wanted to share with other people. And one guy in particular always stood out. He was a ukulele player. And, when we think of workplaces, we don't really think outside, who are you outside work? And this guy was so passionate about ukulele playing. He was part of a group that traveled the world and played in, Sydney Opera House and all this kind of stuff. And what was fascinating was he very quickly had this like group of people who also wanted to learn from him. And then at the end of the project, he was snapped up onto new projects without even having to network because everyone knew who he was. So it was, just the whole gamut of initiatives. Some were really easily or really well received, some slightly more challenging, but we hooked everything into the science of well-being.
I love it. And I'd love to have a ukulele player on every transformation program. That sounds perfect. Sort of piping us in as we walk into the governance meetings.
Scrumming. I think you'll find scrumming you in.
Scrumming us in.
Do you know, Chris, I know this sounds daft, but why don't we? We've made workplaces so bloody sensible and so safe. And, there is an element of me that thinks, what's happened to the fun? How do we bring fun? And I don't mean like jokes and, cringy stuff like that, but, what's happened to bringing fun back into work and helping people to feel like they can be who they are? And I love the psychosocial, the safety conversations that we're having because we're starting to get there. But actually, that's what that looks like, is the person who's got secret skills being willing to share them and teach other people who want to learn.
My secret skill is I can use nunchucks, but I don't think that's going to go down well in a meeting. So I think I'll leave that at the door. Who knew?
Gen CFO ninja.
Yeah, I am curious though, because obviously, like, this was born. This initiative that you talk about was born from a very serious, tragic, traumatic set of circumstances. I remember the earthquakes, and I didn't realize there was sort of so much happening afterwards. I thought it was almost like a one-off event. But and obviously everyone can get behind that burning platform. It makes total sense why we can come together right now to do it. Applying this to the workplace, how can you apply this to the workplace without the crisis?
I think that in itself is an enormous question, and I'm not sure whether it's best answered perhaps with another question, which is how can we not? What is the consequence on organizations that choose not to now lean into understanding what their data is telling them in terms of stress, well-being, health outcomes at work, and then choosing to not do something. I'm just, even back in the 90s when, part of my role was exploring the Great Place to Work surveys and looking at what is it that makes a good employer. I'm not sure any of that's changed, Chris. I just think it's become more spotlighted. And I'd love to hope that what we've done is we've created the platform for a groundswell of change in terms of leaders realizing that when you're leading a team of flat batteries, your work is harder. When you're leading a team of people who are either fully charged or understand the importance of recharging, your change transformations are going to go completely differently. You're not going to come up against as much resistance. People are going to be more open to feedback and growth. You're going to have better relationships within the team. You're going to have people who have got more ideas about how to make this work as opposed to more resistance about why it's not going to, and that's just part and parcel, I think, or I'd like to think of, how businesses are going to evolve. Now we've got the spotlight on this.
I've always got two things. So the first thing is, you said the 90s, then like it was ages ago, and it's only last week. But
10 years at most.
Exactly. But the serious one is this is all we're all being very positive and uplifting and uplifted by it. But I'm a bit more skeptical actually that without the crisis and without the kind of cataclysmic disaster, obviously in the business sense, it could be, going bankrupt or whatever it is. I don't think people are prepared. There's lots of people that are prepared to look at their processes and how they do things and how they operate. So people leaving because they're unhappy or they're burnt out or whatever, is just a consequence.
Yeah.
I think it's only when we had a good talk with Bernd, actually, one of the Gen CFO members a year or so ago, where it was like, you have to have the burning platform. In my head, it's like, how do you create the burning platform, or the feeling or the fear of the burning platform, to get people then to engage? Because I think you do need to do that.
I think he went one step further than that, and he said you have to get people to feel the pain.
Yes.
Yeah, of the change before they will change.
And I think you're beautifully highlighting what the risk is, which is the burnout factor. And I think, one of the fascinating things about humans is that we have this ridiculous tendency to wait until something is so painful it's not funny before we actually do something about it. And I guess, there is absolutely the burning platform argument, Mike. And I think, too many people are waiting until they've burnt out before they choose to do something. And to be perfectly frank, that's too late, because once you've burnt out, you've lost your person, you've lost your productivity, you've lost your outcomes. From a business perspective, you've messed up big time. And so waiting until somebody burns out, relying on asking them, are you okay? And that whole EAP, mental health support. If you are serious about making money as an organization, then you've left it too late, if that's your strategy. So maybe that becomes the burning platform. If you want people to understand burnout, what it feels like, notice they're burning out rather than waiting until it's too late. Then the business is much more likely to be successful. And I think it's early days. I mean, God, burnout was only defined, I think, by the World Health Organization just a few years ago. So actually, the science is just catching up. There's an amazing researcher over in New Zealand, a guy called Nick Petrie. So please do check him out on LinkedIn. He's pumping out research about burnout at the moment, and it's all new research. So, there's a little bit of me that thinks, yes, we could wait for the burning platform, but is that going to be sound business strategy? Everyone's going to answer that differently.
No, I mean, I agree. I absolutely agree. You don't want to wait for that. And one of the things that I've used the term the shit filters before when working in a business, which is generally what happens when reporting upwards is you report up good news. And you only report up good news. So even if you've got stuff happening that's not great, you don't report that upwards until it is cataclysmically bad.
Gosh, yeah.
And then when it's cataclysmically bad, people will take action, but it might be too late. What we're actually talking about in some respects is, how do you navigate? How do you remove those filters? How do you actually have honest conversations about what's going on?
Absolutely. And that truth, that honesty. So ironically, we were talking before about Clifton strengths and so on. Honesty is one of my superpowers, one of my strengths. And I think it's really important that we dial up honesty with courage, and we say, look, let's face the truth of what's going on within our business, because it's only when we do that we can actually make sound business decisions about the well-being of our people, which isn't how many go to the gym, but it's actually how do they show up at work? Are they feeling good? Are they functioning well? And are they feeling connected? And if you can't tick those three, you've got a well-being problem in your organization. So what are you going to do about it? Because just hoping it will get better by itself is not going to work. People will naturally wait until they fall over before they actually do something.
Just remind me of that stat, that cortisol stat as well, because that was a bit scary. How you were saying in a sort of the trauma of the earthquake?
Up to 10 years. So wow. This again, science, very, very new. And remember that was information that was designed around the research that we did within Christchurch, New Zealand. But if you step that back, data is about stepping back the story, isn't it? And, if you step that back and think, look, who do you know in your world that seems to present as having a fairly strong battery? Their battery is typically sort of 80% charged plus. When the big shit happens to them, I've just learned I can say shit. So when the big shit happens to them, there's just something about how they navigate those times, those events, that seems to be different to the people in your world who who seem to operate from a fairly flat battery most of the time. When the big shit happens to them, typically it lasts longer, it's harder, they need more support, it takes a lot longer for them to come back from that. I can see Mike nodding. It's almost like common sense, but not. We need the numbers to help give us confidence around this. And this is one of the key messages that I talk about in New Zealand. Look, if you're leading a team of people and you've led them through the last sort of 3 to 4 years, you'll notice that batteries are flatter. That's been, we're a bit crispy, as one of my wonderful friends, Denise Quinlan, refers to. We're a bit crispy around the edges. So, how do we help people come back from that, as opposed to just talking about them behind the back, or moving them to another project, or hoping someone will tell them about it. As leaders, as organizations, we have the opportunity to lean into this now, and actually to help people to do something about it.
What strikes me, what went through my head is the similarity of what you're describing with like the cycle of grief. And people, when they're grieving, will obviously experience it differently, and some people are more resilient to it than others, and some people respond to it differently. I don't think we have any problem in recognizing that people deal with grief differently.
No, you're so right, Mike. And so one of my incredible mentors, so I was lucky enough to be asked to write a book about this, and it is available, Resilience at Work, if anybody is interested in. It's not exactly holiday reading, but it's certainly something that goes into more detail about this. But through the writing of that book, Dr. Denise Quinlan was one of my academic supervisors. Not Dr. Denise Quinlan, sorry, Dr. Lucy Hone was one of my academic supervisors. And Lucy has done a TED talk about exactly that, Mike. She's talking about grief. And her TED talk is called The 3 Secrets of Resilient People. And I would love every human on the planet to watch that, and to really lean into, the power of understanding grief and crisis and life, and the impact it has on us, and then how we choose our actions as a result. Because there is a lot more choice that we have than we perhaps realize, and it's leaning into that choice and then making our decisions that can help us to come back from wherever it is we are right now. It's very unlikely. I learned from the Christchurch earthquake years that you're often never the same again. So, a crisis doesn't mean you bounce back necessarily. It may mean that you have to reform and gather up all the bits of you that you had before, put them back together, see what you've got, and then work out how you come back to feeling more like you again.
It's fascinating. I just caught myself sort of turning into a listener there instead of actually a host. So I had to catch myself. There's so much in there, and so much relevant to, on a personal level, but also in the workplace. And I think there's a lot of people who are kind of managing the symptoms rather than the causes at the moment. And, as our community, we talk about change fatigue a lot, but it's almost too late, and bad corporate change could probably be as traumatic. Hopefully it's not, the 10 years of that cortisol, but there's one technical thing that I did want to flush out, because you're a coach. You're many things actually, but you're a coach as well. And I've got a question, and just a reminder to the audience, if you do want to ask a question, then questions to podcast@generationcfo.com, who produce this podcast, or reach out to Mike and myself. We run a sort of leadership community, and we have a voluntary mentoring program. And our senior members sort of volunteer their time to mentor other members. But what is the difference between coaching and what you do and mentoring? And why would you mentor versus, why would you coach?
Yeah, lovely. So I think one of the really simplest ways that I personally like to explain the difference is to also include the definition of training or consulting. And so the reason for the 3, I hope, should become clear when I kind of unpack it. So if you imagine information and energy flow, if my transmit of information and energy is from me to you. I'm pushing information towards you. I'm telling you what I think you should do, and I'm giving you advice and guidance that's mine. Then I'm probably training or consulting. I'm telling you there's that outwardly flowing information. If I'm drawing information from you, so I'm asking you questions to invite you to reflect on your own knowledge, your own information, your own experiences, then typically that's effectively coaching. So that's where I'm drawing information from you about what's going on for you. So those are two, I guess, simple ways of exchanging information. And where I believe mentoring fits with this is that mentoring can use both of those approaches. So if I'm mentoring you, I might ask you some questions, but I might also tell you some stuff. And so I'm going to use both of those approaches in my mentoring discussion with you. But my mentoring discussion is going to be very, very closely aligned, almost identically, to what I've experienced in the past. So if you and I, Chris, are working together, I can mentor you if you want to become self-employed, if you want to move to New Zealand, if you want to coach and grow teams through crisis and earthquakes, because that's a path I've trodden. But I can coach you in absolutely anything, because it's not what I think, what I believe, what I'm telling you. It's what you think, what you believe, what you already know. And in fact, I'll often do my best coaching with somebody who you're going through something I've never experienced, because I won't ask you accidental, like stealth questions that really are about, me trying to tell you what to do by asking questions.
I think you should do this. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you thought about asking this person?
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm going to clip that out of the podcast and get some kind of AI to transcribe it for me and nick it, Kat, because that was brilliant. I was going to say, there's one thing that I just wanted to add on the mentoring thing, the mentoring side, that just always strikes me, is that mentoring for me is always seen in a hierarchical way. So somebody more senior or older mentors somebody junior, and I hate that, because it's the experience thing. It's exactly as you described it. It's that I've done this, I trod on that path, so I can then help you irrespective of your pay grade. And I think that gets lost.
Totally. And Mike, there's been some incredible examples, actually mostly in the UK, in terms of reverse mentoring programs, where actually it's the younger folks that mentor the older folks, and not just about tech usage, but actually, about their own experience and their world. And I just think the more we're open to learning from each other, as opposed to what online communities accidentally do, which create these kind of echo chambers of identical thoughts and reflections, the more we can learn about other people, the more we realize they're actually not that scary. They're fellow humans that are just on a different journey. And actually, we're all part of the same environment. So, how do we make that work better for everybody?
I love it. Well, that's definitely answered the question and some, and made it a lot clearer to me as well. So thank you for that. So on to good data, bad data. Now, last time, and this is very relevant, I think, for this conversation. Last time, or maybe the week before, we were talking about strengths, and we talked about specifically the Clifton Strength Finder, which is a way of identifying strengths, for career planning and talent planning and all the rest of it. And Mike, you volunteered this up as a bit of visualization, which I think we're going to rip apart a bit, are we?
Well, I'm determined to make today's podcast all about me. So I thought I'd share. I thought I'd share with as good data, or good data or bad data, depending on your perspective. The Clifton Strengths Finder results from a few years ago now, but I don't think they've changed massively since here. For you to rip apart. Firstly, though, I'm going to say why I like it. So basically, what you're both looking at is a list of 34 strengths and effectively my priority order of how I like them. So at the top, there's a few things which really resonate with me. So maximize a strategic adaptability, which absolutely sounds and feels like me. So they're the things that I'm good at and I enjoy doing. Maximizing is taking good stuff and making it better. Strategic is helicopter viewing over things and trying to understand it, and adaptability is about being able to move about and drop into different things really quickly. those all feel like me, and those are the things to the conversation we've had today. If I'm in meetings and that's what's happening, I walk out of feeling yes.
Yeah.
But then on the flip side, right at the bottom, I've got 2 or 3. This is going to, even just saying them is quite funny. Discipline is quite low. Harmony is quite low. Includer is quite low. Which for me are all about things that I don't necessarily come as naturally to me in any stretch, and I have to be really, really careful that I don't ignore. So I am very, very good at accidentally pissing people off.
Just because, but I would flip that around, right? And I know that we talked last time with Lisa, I think it was, about, you know, doubling down on your strengths and not necessarily covering your weaknesses. Just actually partner on your weaknesses, you know, because they're never going to be, you know, as strong as pursuing your strength. But if I look at those, I think the work we've done together, you know, they're great for a disruptive conversation, right? Or trying to draw out, you know, challenge and difficult questions.
The strengths, you mean? Or
no, the negatives.
Oh, negative.
So almost by, you know, you're thinking strategically, but you don't care if you challenge people to get what you need. And I see that almost the other way around. Yes, it's something you're prepared to do and might be seen as a negative, but it could also be a strength given the situation.
And I think just sort of even building on what Chris has just said, you know, strengths are either strengths that we use more naturally or strengths that are lesser used strengths. And all it's doing, Mike, I think, is highlighting the stuff that doesn't come as easily or as naturally to you. We can all lean into every strength. And, you know, from the chat that we had beforehand, that I love the VIA character strengths. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that, yes, when we lean into our higher strengths, or the ones that feature at the top of our list, we're likely to be more energized by them. We're likely to really enjoy using them, and they're likely to come easily to us. And you know, they play an enormous part in well-being, because if you've had a day where you've used those strengths, Mike, you're probably going to have a more green battery than if you have a day where you're forced to use stuff you don't enjoy. Or, and here's the other side, where you've felt like you've overextended those. So again, back to the battery analogy, when Mike's got a flat battery, he might lose that kind of self-awareness in terms of, you know, adaptability is a strength, but now I can't make a decision because I'm constantly adapting and I can't work out which way's up, because my battery's flat, so I'm not able to kind of keep that sense of awareness. So I think, and adding as well, you know, what Chris is noticing you is different. And I think one of the risks with these character strength assessments is that it's just our own perception. And so the more you can take this to people who really know you and who you really trust, and actually just have a really curious discussion about them, you know, how do you see this showing up for me, and what do you agree with, and where would you challenge me? You know, that's where the real power of data comes from, because it's a snapshot in time. And so, you know, we've got the opportunity to look at the story it's telling us, and then think about whether we want to change the outcomes of that story.
I think you've teed me up nicely there, because I also wanted to put this in the bad data camp, because as much as this is, you know, it's good data on one hand, I do find this quite complicated to use. I've used something in the past called disk profiling. You mentioned VIA, I think it was. And, you know, but the point is, I think this is just a good conversation starter. And, you know, there's a risk here that, you know, you load this into an AI environment and the algorithm starts crunching and says, Mike should never be put on a transformation project because he's you know, all these negatives, but actually he's really strong in a transformation environment for the very same reasons. So I don't like it as a device.
I'm going to jump in, not to disagree, but just to say, this is reminding me of the conversation that I forced you to have the other week around the change curve in some respects, because for me, this is not a Bible type tool which tells me this is how it is. It's much more an awareness tool that tells me things to look out for.
Beautiful.
So for me, I know, and one of the things that I've learned over time about me is I can see the joins between things way before other people can spot them in work environment. But equally, before I was really aware of that, I could get very pissed off with other people not getting it. So the kind of like the strategic thing was the strength allowing me to see things, but actually my lack of harmony and wanting to be harmonious meant that I was constantly seeing that as a conflict. This was a tool that helped me be more self-aware, rather than now all I do is look for stuff that means that I do these things. And that was the same as the conversation with the change curve, which is, it's not this is how it works. It's much more, these are the things that could happen. You need to look out for them.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, Mike. And it's almost like, if you to weave it into what we've been talking about in terms of batteries, like if you know that you're going into an environment that is disharmonious, where you know that there is going to be lots of conflict, just don't go in with a flat battery. Use the protective factor of well-being to charge up before you go into that environment. And yes, it will still be harder, because it's not something that you have that comes naturally to you. Have to work harder to do it, but all of us can leverage those strengths. So yeah, awesome.
Well, I don't know about you, Mike.
Or just passive aggressively don't turn up. No, I'm joking. I'm joking, of course.
That's the way he works. I don't know about you, Mike, but I'm quite enjoying this group mentoring coaching session. I'm not sure for you. And obviously, if the audience has any views on Mike and the way he works, then it's podcast.
Please don't do that.
No, that was brilliant. A interesting conversation and a lot of takeaways there. Kathryn, where can people connect with you? What's the best way of getting in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to get in touch is probably either sending me a direct message on LinkedIn. So my profile will be included, I guess, with this podcast. Alternatively, I've got a website that people can go to, or they can email me and call me on the numbers that I'm sure we'll be providing. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, please do. I'm constantly sharing disruptive, kind, polite, disruptive messages that are along the lines of what we've already talked about today. So please stay connected.
Sounds good.
You're going to have to tell me what the website is now.
Sure. It's www.careerbalance.co.nz. And so on that website is all information about my background, I guess, and what I do, but also the Great Recharge, which is now available in the UK. I have a UK-based facilitator, but I'm also I'm a bit tired of hearing wellbeing programs that rely on external motivational speakers, and so I've actually designed this as a program that can be engaged with in-house. So it's not something that you need to you don't need to fly me over from New Zealand every time you want to deliver it. It's something that people run for themselves.
Deliver it at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my God.
Equally a pain in the bum, no doubt. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for your time today. That was great. I think, a lot covered again, but I took away, help people recharge. I think that's and understand it. I think there was a lot of conversation there about trying to manage the causes rather than the symptoms as well, which we all seem to be very good at talking about, but actually try to get ahead of this a bit. And you mentioned was it the 3 secrets of resilient people?
Yeah. So Dr. Lucy Hone was an academic supervisor, and her TED Talk, The 3 Secrets of Resilient People, is absolutely fantastic. I think it was one of the top 20 most watched TED Talks of 2021. So, really topical for what we went through in the COVID years. But, well-being is something that is for life, not just post-COVID.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Kathryn, for today. Thank you from me. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everyone.
And remember, it's not all about the numbers.